Mic check, 1, 2, sound check, 1, 2. Good morning, everybody. We start this live a little bit later than I usually start, but better late than never. But as they say, never late is better. Hope everybody's having a great start to your day. We want to get right into this because we are short on time. We're long on game, but short on time. So we want to make sure I get you all as much game as we can get you in the limited amount of time that we have here. So you can take this with you in a limited amount of time you have left in your life and actually do something with it. So y'all see the topic today. We're going to talk about the rules for having a high performance culture. Now, most of you have probably heard this phrase, high performance, especially if you're in any type of, or you're into any type of personal or professional development. People talk about this stuff all the time. High performance is basically a buzzword, a buzz phrase that gets used in our spaces a lot, especially any of you who's into, let's say, any type of training, motivation, inspiration. If you watch videos on YouTube, et cetera, people are always talking about high performance. So since you've heard the phrase, you hear a lot of people talking about it, or at least maybe some of you do, I'm going to assume that many of you who consume material like mine, because my company is literally called Work on Your Game. So I'm guessing you're not listening to anything about high performance if you're not serious about you actually being that high performer. So today I want to explain how you can build a culture of high performance, whether you are doing it just as one person by yourself. So when I say a culture, it doesn't mean you need to have 10 people around you. When I say a culture of high performance, I just mean with yourself, because you have a culture personally. You have an individual culture, and or your family can have a culture, your business can have a culture, you play a sport, there's a culture there, you live in a community, everybody who lives in your neighborhood, that's a culture as well. So how can you build a higher performance culture? Now, let me tell you who I am, just introducing myself for those who don't know me and help you understand why I even care about this stuff and why I talk about these things. If you've been watching my past few lives where I've talked about some current events, you also have heard me multiple times kind of slip in there and let you all understand where I come from and what I do. Most of my material is about, which is not current events, it's not politics. Of course, we're talking about it because of the situation that we're in right now. It's an election coming up. So of course I'm gonna take advantage as a person who makes content. I'm not a full-time content creator, but I take advantage of the opportunity when there's news. But when there's not that, this is usually what I'm doing most of the time. So my name is Dre Baldwin. Many know me as Dre all day. I'm a former 9-year pro athlete. I'm the author of 35 books. I've done 4 TEDx talks. This brand, Work on Your Game. Our job here is to help you perform at your highest level, i.e. high performance culture. Do it consistently. So you're not just performing at your highest level every once in a while, or you did on Monday and Tuesday, and then you took Wednesday and Thursday and you were half-assed, but it's consistent. And of course, we're doing all this so that you can produce results, because that's the business that we're in. All of us are in a results-based business. Our jobs, when we show up to do our work on a daily basis, whatever your work is, whether you're a plumber, you're a construction worker, you're a librarian, you're a soccer player, you're a YouTuber, whatever it is, your job is to produce a result. So when you're clear on what the result is, then we want to figure out what performance gets us there and how do we do it over and over again so that that outcome, that result, we can do it consistently. How can we make these sales every single day? How can we hit this quota all the time? How can we win games as a normal thing, not as a randomized thing happening? So that's what I'm about. That's what our brand and business is about. And that's why I talk about things like high performance. So I'll give you 3 simple things. These are simple, maybe not easy, but 3 simple things that will need to be in place if you're going to have a high performance culture. Number 1 thing is a standard. Standards. What do standards mean? Standards means rules. It means it means a clear delineation between what is acceptable versus what is not acceptable. When the standards are clear, actually, let me back up. If you want to have a high performance culture, the standards must be clear. All right, so when the standards are clear, that's one indicator that you may have a high performance culture. That's not the only thing. That's not the only piece of it. That's one number in the combination lock. But any high performance culture where people are performing at their best and doing it on a consistent basis, guaranteed there are standards in place there. Whether those standards are publicly announced, whether they are internal, Everybody knows what the standards are. And the reason why any human being, but that this applies to you just as well as it applies to anyone else. Anytime you see human beings, singular or plural, performing at a high level, what you consider high, on a consistent basis, there is a standard in place that leads to that outcome. Nobody just performs at a super high level on a consistent basis randomly or by luck. Now, if you are super talented at something, you may be doing better than other people just because you have natural abilities that other people don't have. However, to do it consistently over an extended period of time, especially when you run into challenges, bumps in the road, friction, opposition, etc., the only way you can keep that up is you have to have standards in place. Everyone understand this? There had to be some type of standards in place. For example, right now we got a bunch of sports seasons all happening at the same time, right? We got basketball just started, football is going, baseball is in the playoffs, and I think hockey has started. I don't follow hockey, but I think hockey and basketball have pretty much similar seasons. Anytime you see a player in those sports playing really well on a consistent basis, when I say consistent, I mean like year after year after year, guaranteed there are standards to do that, because at the highest levels of any profession, highest levels of anything where people are making money for doing it, excuse me, as a full-time job, you can't keep performing better than most of your peers by accident, because everybody's very good. Now, if you're an 8th grader and you're just better than everybody else on the middle school soccer team, you could dominate every game without trying, because you're just so much more talented than your opponents. But at the professional level where everybody's talented, you can't keep doing that year after year after year without having some standards in place for how you perform. There had to be some standards for your preparation, for your performance, for your training, for your recovery, for your practice, everything. There had to be standards in place. All right. So this is the starting and end point for any high level individual or organization. And an organization can be 2 people, organization can be 1 million people. Standard simply means rules, baselines, and non-negotiables. That's all it means. So here's a question for you. What are your rules, baselines, and non-negotiables when it comes to your performance, when it comes to your life, when it comes to your career, when it comes to all the things that you do? What are they? I'll tell you, when I was working as an intern, my senior year of college, we had to do an internship to get a business degree from Penn State University, at least back then. I don't know what it is now, probably the same thing. You had to do an internship. So I was doing this internship with this local businessman named Phil Sky. He's passed away now. And I would just hang with him a lot of times. He didn't really have a formal internship program, so I kind of skated by on that internship because he didn't have a formal program for what I was supposed to do. But I would spend a lot of time hanging around him. He told me one of the things he said, one thing you learn when you're a manager, because he owned multiple businesses. He said, when you're a manager or owner of a business, you learn that people do not what you expect, but what you inspect. And having inspection and people knowing that you're going to inspect their work, not just expect them to do it, but you're going to inspect and make sure they did it, that's a form of the standard. Because if you tell me, hey, make sure that you get all these documents taken care of, and I say, okay, and I know that you're not going to double check me, I might do half of it and not do the rest of it until tomorrow or until I feel like it, or I might just not even do it. But if I know that you're going to double check me, I know you're going to inspect my work, then I can't act like that I did it. When you go inspect it, you see, hey, Dre, you only did half of the work that I told you to do. And if I keep violating that inspection, then I probably end up losing my job or facing some other type of penalty. All right, that's what a standard is. Standard is, again, not just letting people know that you expect something out of them. And it's good to set expectations, because human beings tend to live up to or down to whatever expectations are set before them. We all do this. But you should also inspect those expectations to make sure that people are actually doing the stuff that you want them to do. And you are giving them the tools to actually help them do it. For example, since basketball season just started, the Los Angeles Lakers. And now we want to go back, though. I'm not talking about the Lakers right now. I'm talking about the Lakers back in the 1980s. They had this coach named Pat Riley. Most of you know Pat Riley. And their star player was a guy named Magic Johnson. Most of you know who Magic is. And the LA Lakers lost. They got eliminated from the playoffs in 1986. They were supposed to be one of the best teams in the league. It was them and the Boston Celtics back and forth throughout the 80s. In 1986, the Celtics made it to the finals, and most people thought they were going to play against the Lakers, but the Lakers ended up losing in the playoffs because they just weren't as sharp as they could have been. And Pat Riley decided that he was going to hold his team to higher standards to make sure that they didn't come up short in the playoffs again the way they had done that previous year. So he came up with this numerical stat. I don't remember exactly what he called it, but he basically came up with a number for every player on the roster, from the star player Magic and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar all the way down to the guy at the end of the bench. And he came up with this metric that shows like how players are performing, if they're getting better or worse, and he would keep updating the stat over the course of the season. So every player could measure how well they were doing, whether they were getting better or they were getting worse based on their performance every single game. And what this created was a standard. What Pat Riley had done is create a standard for his team. Let's not just look at winning the game and losing the game. Of course, that's part of it because that's how you win championships. But let's also make sure each one of you individually knows whether you're getting better or worse over the course of a season. He would show them the number, and they would all see the number, and they would all know if they were doing better or worse. And that standard helped everybody step their game up. So what ended up happening, for those of you who know the history or you don't, 1987, the Lakers did win the championship after falling short in 86. They had won in 85 already. So they won in 85, got eliminated in 1986. They won the championship in 1987. When they won the championship, Pat Riley announced during the celebration, there's still spraying champagne everywhere, he announced, we're going to win it again in 1988. And they did indeed win the championship again in 1988. And then when they won it in 1988, Pat Riley announced again during the celebration, we're going to win it again in 1989. They went to the finals in 1989, but they lost. They lost to the Detroit Pistons. But the Lakers, even with that, they won 3 championships in 4 years. And it was all because Pat Riley set these super high standards for his players to live up to and perform at. So it's an expectation along with an inspection of the expectation. So don't just say, I expect you to play great. Say, okay, here's the metric that we're going to measure your greatness by. And if you're coming up short, we're going to know and you're going to know because it's going to be right there in front of your face. High performance cultures have this in place. All right, so any of you individually, you want to be a high performer just by yourself. Forget about anybody else. You need to know what are the expectations for your performance and how are you measuring them and how will you know that you're actually living up to them? You should have answers to those questions. What are your expectations for performance? What does it need to look like? How do you measure? And then if you're coming up short, what do you do? All right, 3 questions. What is it? How do you measure? What do you do? 1, 2, 3. Every high performance person or I got Paul's connection over on IG. There we go. Every high performance person or organization does this. Okay. So you must set standards for yourself, folks, and make sure that you're checking on them on a regular basis. Point number 2, we're talking here today about how to have a high performance culture, what it looks like, what it feels like, and what it means. Number 2 is you raise the floor. What does raising the floor mean? Raising the floor is a little bit about what I just told you with Pat Riley and the LA Lakers back in the 80s, but it's basically the inverse of it, which works for you as well. So most of the time, and most of you can probably use yourselves as an example here, with anything that you want to get better at, right? One thing that you can do is you can raise the ceiling. Say, all right, I'm making $1,000 a month. I want to make $1,500 a month. I want to make $2,000. I want to make $10,000. That's raising the ceiling. So it's basically taking the high level mark that you're currently hitting and saying, I want to hit a higher level mark. So I want to go from level 1 to level 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. $1,000, $2,000, $10,000, $50,000, $100,000. That's called raising the ceiling. Raising the floor is the flip side of this, which works as well. Raising the floor means here's the minimum that is acceptable, and you're raising the minimum acceptability level of what you're doing. Raising the floor works just as well, if not better, depending on who you ask. I've heard many people say that raising the floor is actually a more effective strategy than raising the ceiling. So what exactly does this mean? So let's use money as an example here. All right. We can use several things. I'll give you a couple examples. So let's use money as an example. So right now you're making $1,000 a month, right? And you want to make more money. You want to make $5,000 or $10,000 a month. So that's raising the ceiling. Raising the floor is that the minimum acceptable amount every month is no longer $1,000. The minimum acceptable amount is now $2,000. Anyone who's not making at least $2,000 a month, let's say I'm running a sales organization. If you're not making at least $2,000 a month in sales, you're fired. All right, that's raising the floor. Not you have to make this much, but if you're not making at least this much, you're fired. For example, I've talked about tipping culture, like in America, especially. You see a lot of places, especially in big cities, probably that there's this whole culture of tipping, right? Where now you go order something from who knows you go order some pickup food, like this food is already prepared. You pick it up off the shelf, bring it up to the counter, pay for it, and they got a little thing on there that says, "Do you want to add a tip?" Like, what am I giving you a tip for? You didn't do anything. I'm giving you a tip, but so this is the whole thing in America. But there are restaurants, high-end restaurants, like these 5-star restaurants in big cities like Chicago, New York, LA, etc., where I don't know if y'all know about this, but the wait staff is held to a standard of how much money they make in tips. Any of you ever worked in any type of wait service, y'all know that you're supposed to declare how much you made in tips, right? And nowadays, it's harder to lie about how much you make in tips. Back in the days, one of my first jobs, I was working at this place called Pizza Hut. Y'all know Pizza Hut. And I would wait tables. And Pizza Hut is not a high-end restaurant. But a lot of times the tips would be cash. So if you made $50 in tips, you could just report that you only made like 30, right? And you would report a little bit less than what you actually made, because then the rest of it would be made up on your check. So you didn't really tell the truth. And you would get taxed on everything that you reported. So you would often underreport how much you made in tips. The thing is, these days, because a lot of times the tip is on a card, now the tip is on the receipt. So you're not getting cash. And any of you who's worked in any type of wait staff work, you prefer cash tips because, again, you don't have to report that you got it and you can't be taxed on it. And nobody else could dip their hands into it like the government or your boss or anybody else. But nowadays, a lot of the tips are reported. So anyway, this restaurant up in, again, these 5-star restaurants, they tell their wait staff that everybody on the wait staff should be making at least $100,000 a year in tips. And if you're not making at least $100,000 a year in tips, they will fire you from the job simply because it's obvious that being who we are, our restaurant, the type of clientele we have, and the type of prices that are on our menu, if you can't earn at least, let's just say for rough math purposes, if you're not earning at least $10,000 a month in tips, you are just not that good of a waiter or waitress, and you can't work here and you're fired. That's how they choose to fire people. They don't say you need to be making this much. They say the minimum is you got to make this much. If you're not making $100,000 a year in tips, you shouldn't work here. They fire you. That's what I mean by raising the floor. I'm giving you that example as raising the floor. And I mentioned basketball. So basketball season starts. Some of you may know this, some of you may not know it. But on NBA teams, there's often a conditioning mandate that every player, based on your position, there's a certain conditioning level that you have to be at. So we'll take a team like Miami Heat, where I live here in Miami, that there's a conditioning test that every player has to go through. And until you pass the conditioning test, you can't actually suit up and play in a game. So if a player's coming off injury and their conditioning is not there yet, the team won't let them suit up for a game yet because they're not in shape yet. So they got to get their conditioning right, and then they got to pass the test. So the test might be something like, you got to do 10 sprints up and down the court, and you got to do it within this time frame. So you got to finish your 10 sprints in 52 seconds or less. And if you don't do it in 52 seconds or less, that means you are not properly conditioned yet. You're not ready to play in the game. Therefore, you can't play in the game until you can hit that number. That's an example of raising the floor. So if they changed it from 52 seconds to 47 seconds, that's raising the floor. Now everybody has to be even faster. You got to be in even better shape. That's an example of raising the floor. So for all of you, what does that look like? That means taking the minimum that you are accepting of and saying, I'm not accepting anything less than this moving forward. Anything less than this, I'm just not even paying attention. There's a saying from back in the day, like there was some famous woman, she was like a supermodel or a TV star actress, and they would say, how much does this person charge for doing their business? And it was a saying, as a tongue-in-cheek thing, but it's also a good example that illustrates my point, is that this actress says something like, listen, for less than $10,000, I'm not even getting out of bed. That's an example of raising the floor. So if you're not offering me at least $10,000 to do something, don't even call me. Don't even offer it to me. Don't even bring it to me because I'm not interested. That's an example of raising the floor. Another example I'll give you is, and this is an illustration, an example, is not something that they actually said, but Donald Trump, we all know the politician Donald Trump, but this is pre-politics Donald Trump. He wrote a book with this guy. I forget the guy's name, but I read the book, but I forget the guy he wrote the book with. But anyway, this guy who he wrote the book with, and this is not a political point, he wanted to hire Trump to be a speaker at one of his events because he had this personal development, business-minded people in his kind of mastermind. So he wanted to hire Donald Trump to be a speaker at his event in New York City when Donald Trump was based in New York City. And he calls Donald Trump's office and he gets to his secretary. He says, I want to hire Mr. Trump to speak in my event. And the woman said, okay, what's your budget to hire Mr. Trump? And he said, I got $10,000. The woman said, we're not interested, and basically ended the conversation. So the guy was like, well, I really wanted Donald Trump. So I just figured, let me go gather some more money. Maybe it's just a money thing. He comes back and he says, he calls her again, same conversation. She said, how much money you got for him? And he said, I got $25,000. She said, Mr. Trump is not available. He's not interested. Thank you for calling. Ended the conversation. He says, well, I really wanted Donald Trump. So he goes get some more money. He comes back and says, I got $50,000 for Mr. Trump. Same answer. He's not interested. Thank you for calling. He goes back and gets more money. They keep doing this back and forth. Finally, he gets up to, I got $150,000 for Mr. Trump to come speak at my event. And the woman said, okay, then we have some openings on our schedule. We can make that work. That's an example of setting the floor. Now, he didn't, again, nobody announced it. The secretary never said to him, hey, our minimum fee is this much. She just said no. She didn't even say you got to go get this much money. She just kept telling him no until he came with the right amount of money. That's an example of setting the floor. And again, this is in his book. He's the one who paid Trump. This is not Trump talking. This is the guy who paid him talking, telling this story. And that's how they kind of got connected. And that's how they became friends. They ended up writing a book together. I don't remember which book it was. Trump has several books and half of them are written with another person. So anyway, this is what setting the floor is about, folks. So the baseline is the minimum acceptable performance of what you do. What is the minimum acceptable performance? That's known as the baseline. That's the floor. So when you want to step your game up, first of all, I got to pause connection. I'll be back. First of all, you need to set a floor. Some of you have the issue of there is no floor. You have no floor and you may have a ceiling, but you don't have a floor. So a ceiling is how high you can go and the floor is how terrible you can be. Like, what's the worst you can do? The worst you can do, whatever that is, when you raise that, your performance automatically goes up because you just raise the bottom line, the least acceptable level of performance that you could possibly have. If you make that higher than what you're doing right now, then you have no choice but to step up your game. Everyone understand? So it's like if you're used to, I use the example of the conditioning test, or let's just say the waiters at a restaurant. So let's say you used to wait at some nice restaurants, but not a super high-end restaurant, and you made $8,000 a month in tips. You're used to doing it. Every month you make $8,000 a month in tips, but you want to step up to a higher job. So somebody says, hey, come work at this restaurant. It's a 5-star and you can make more money here. And you're used to making your $8,000 a month. You show up to the new job as a waiter and they say, well, here, we know you're used to making $8,000 at the place you came from, but over here, the floor is $10,000. So you need to step your game up because if you don't make at least $10,000 a month, and we're gonna give you a 3-month period. In the first 3 months, if you don't make at least $10,000 by that 3rd month, you're fired and you're gonna have to go back to the places you worked at before. That's an example of raising the floor. Why? Because what you used to do is now no longer acceptable because the standard has gone up. This is how people step their games up. So if you want to be a high performer, and again, when I say high performance culture, this doesn't mean you telling other people what to do necessarily. It can be, but this can just be you with yourself. What's your floor right now, and how high are you willing to raise the floor in order to step your game up? All right, that's what raising the floor is about. High performers, they continually raise the floor by raising, again, that minimum level of accepted output, production, or results. And this is how people keep getting better. So some of you may have the idea that to continually get better, you got to raise the goal, which is the ceiling. All right, I made 1,000, now I want to make 2,000. Made 2,000, now let's make 5. Made 5, now let's make 10. What I'm suggesting is that you flip it around and you raise the floor. Okay, so my minimum before was 1,000. Now my minimum is 2,000. Now my minimum is 10,000. Now my minimum is 100,000. So there was this guy, there's a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. If you haven't read this book, you should go read it. It's called 10X is Easier Than 2X. Any of you knows that title can put it in the comments. People want to get it. People often ask me to tell them again the name of the book. And what he shares a story in that book of this guy who started a financial advising business. Well, he first started as an advisor working for a company, and then he started his own company. And his baseline, when he first started out, any of you works in finance, you may know this. When he first started out, he was told that he needed to get some clients that had like $100,000 of assets to be managed. But this guy decided that he was going to start his career by only working with people who had at least $500,000 to manage. And his manager said to him, nobody's going to let you manage their money when they have $500,000 because you're brand new. You have no experience. You're young. Why would anybody give you all that money to manage when you're brand new? Set your standards lower. He refused, and he decided to set the standards really high. And he started to get clients. He started to get clients at $500,000. Then what he did, because he saw that he was successful at $500,000, he raised his floor to now my standard is $1 million. I'm only managing clients who have at least $1 million. Then he was doing well there. He raised it again. Now it's 5 million. Then he raised it again. Now it's 10 million. And he just kept moving up in his business. And again, he wasn't raising the goal. He was raising the floor. So anyone who I'm going to take on as a client, this is basically what he's saying. He started out by saying, you got to have at least 500 grand. You don't have at least $500,000. for me to manage, then I will not take you on as a client. Then he changed it to $1 million, then 5 million, and 10 million. That's raising the floor. And any of you can do that. And often raising the floor is easier than setting the goal. And setting the goal is hard for some people because you don't quite know what goal to set or how to set it or how high should it be. Is it too high? Is it too low? Well, try this. If you have trouble setting goals, try setting floors. Floors are just the basics. Everybody got this? Good. So based on expectations, again, that can be met by your standards, this is how you choose the floor. So all these pieces work together. So we talked about standards. Now we talk about raising the floor. Now here's the third point. The topic here today is how to create a high performance culture. And I'm going to take questions and comments at the end, by the way. Number 3 is systems of accountability. So everything I've talked about here flows right into what I'm talking about in this point right here. You're going to raise the floor and demand high performance in your organizations. You got to have systems in place that facilitate the level of performance that you want. Therefore, if I'm running a wait staff and I say everyone here has to sell or make at least $10,000 a month in tips. Well, then I had to facilitate the type of environment to where you can make $10,000 a month in tips. First of all, we got to have high priced items on the menu. Secondly, we got to attract the kind of clientele that spends enough money that their tips equate to you being able to make that kind of money. And third, I have to train you to be able to service these people at a level that they want to leave you a nice tip at the end of the night. So you're getting $100 tips and $300 tips based on how much money they're spending on the bill. All right, so I have to facilitate that. So if I'm going to tell you the standards right here, I have to give you the tools to actually perform at the level that I want you to perform at. I can't just say, well, you got to do this and then not give you any tools to actually do it. So anytime that you want to create a culture of high performance for yourself or for others, you got to make sure that you have the tools in place that actually serve the goal that you're looking to reach. So do you have that? Do you have the tools in place, the systems in place, the accountability in place to do the things that you want to do? For example, if you're not in the kind of shape that you want to be in right now physically, but you want to get in great shape, well, maybe working out in the living room by yourself to YouTube videos might not be sufficient. Maybe you need to go to a gym where they have equipment. Maybe you need to join a boot camp class where there's an instructor telling you what to do rather than you deciding on your own what to do, because every 10 minutes you keep picking up your phone and scrolling on Facebook rather than actually doing another set of burpees. Whereas you take the boot camp class, you probably won't have that problem. Maybe you need to hire a personal trainer who can tell you what time to come to the gym, what to do while you're there, and what to eat and what not to eat in between your workout sessions, instead of you eating candy bars and ice cream in between your workouts and basically negating everything you do during your exercise. So sometimes having the right tools and systems in place simply means connecting with someone or something that can hold you to certain standards that you otherwise have been unable to hold yourself to. And don't look at this as meaning that there's something wrong with you. All right, smart people understand that the fastest way to achieve a goal is to use other people's resources. They call it OPR. All right, the fastest way to achieve your goals in life, I'm talking to everyone who's listening to this, I don't care what your goal is or who you are, the fastest way is to use OPR. OPR stands for other people's resources. What are some examples of other people's resources? I just gave you one. Knowledge is a resource. Other people know stuff that you don't know. You don't need to learn it. So if you need to have a website built, you don't need to go buy website coding for dummies and learn how to code. That's a waste, not even a waste, but it's a poor use of time because it's going to take you a long time to figure it out. Whereas if you simply took some money, which is worth a lot less than your time, and hire somebody who already knows how to code, or you go sign up for some service that already has a website coded, you can get your outcome much faster than if you try to do it all on your own. One of the biggest mistakes that people make, and I'll probably do a training on this sometime in the future, is you try to use your time instead of using your money. It's much smarter to use your money instead of using your time. Why is this? For one simple reason, that money is replaceable and time is not replaceable. But how many people think, how many of you have been conditioned and taught your entire lives is that money and time are either equal or that money is worth more than time. This is false, and you got to get this out of your head. How many of you have ever been broke with no money whatsoever? Probably everybody's been there at some point, even if it was when you were 5 years old, you didn't really have any money. But all of you have lived to tell the story of having no money, because you could go from having no money to having a lot of money and back down and back up. That can happen to anybody. But none of you has ever been in a position of not having any time. When I say not having any time, what I mean is no more time on your life clock, which is also called death. I've never heard of anybody dying and coming back and telling the story. All right, that doesn't happen. But you can be broke and come back and tell the story. Therefore, that y'all should understand this. Again, you can run out of money and you can live. You run out of time, you're dead. Therefore, you should always, always, always look for ways to use money to buy time. Money serves time. Time does not serve money. You understand that? So when you ever hear somebody say time is money, I get what they mean. I get the direction of what they mean, but it's actually not true. That is incorrect. Time and money are not equals. Time is worth 10 times more than money. Therefore, you should use as much money as you can get to buy as much time as possible. You ever heard of as the saying goes, if someone's a billionaire and they only got 10 days left to live, all right, no amount of money can buy them more time. Get it? So the money is not nearly as valuable as the time. Always figure out ways to use your money to get yourself more time. So these accountabilities and these systems, back to what I'm talking about here. You want to have a culture of high performance. Thank you. Who gave me that? Marion, thank you for that gift that you just gave. So you're going to have a culture of high performance. You need to set the culture up so that high performance is actually possible. Right? You can't tell people to be high performers and not give them the tools to perform. Right? You want to tell somebody to be a high performer, you got to give them the tools to actually do the performance that you want them to do. It's like if you hired a sales team, let's say I hired a sales team to go do sales for me, I got to give them the leads. I was doing the training for this guy who runs an insurance agency earlier this week. And he told me that he spends 6 figures every month on leads to give to his salespeople so that they can actually do their jobs, because he has a certain expectation of how many sales he wants everybody to make. In order for them to make sales, they need people to call. And he understands that for them to make those calls and make the sales, he must provide the people for them to call. You got to give them the leads. So he spends all this money on leads. Then they have a system that they got to follow in order to make the sales. But if he wasn't giving them the leads, then it would make no sense for him to have the expectation that they're going to make sales. You understand? So any expectation that you're setting or any standard that you want to set for yourself or for anyone else, you must ask yourself, am I creating an environment that even makes sense to have this expectation of this individual? So you got to set the environment up so that people can actually do the thing that you're expecting them to do. And then you give them the tools, you show them how to use the tools, and now you can hold them to a standard. But if you don't give them the tools, again, you can't have a sales organization tell somebody you need to make 10 sales a day and you're not giving them any leads. So how are they going to make sales? They don't got nobody to call. That's your responsibility. So setting standards for other people is not just about, it's just 100% they got to do stuff and you're like the slave driver cracking the whip on their back. That's not what it's all about. That's part of it. But the other part of it is you got to create an environment that actually is conducive to the goal that you want them to reach. Your environment must be conducive to the goals that you set for yourself or for others. So you, for example, you want to make 10 sales a day. Let's take teams out of it. Let's say you don't have a team. I got a pause connection. Let's say you don't have a team. Let's say it's just you. You want to make 10 sales a day. Okay, who are you going to call and make those sales? You don't have any leads in your CRM. You have no people to call on, but you're expecting to make 10 sales a day. The expectation is out of line with the environment. So the environment and the expectations must be aligned. So it's like, I remember back in the days when I used to make a lot of basketball content on YouTube specifically, I would get ball players coming to me and they would say something like, Dre, they would live in some country outside of America often. And they would say, I want to be a basketball player. I want to get really good. But the closest basketball court, first of all, is outside. And I live in this country where it gets cold in the winter. Secondly, the court is like 3 miles away. I can't walk there and my parents won't drive me there. But I want to be a really good basketball player, Dre. How am I supposed to work on my game with this situation? And I would say, well, the first thing I say to them is that your environment is not conducive to your goal. All right, your environment and your goal are in conflict. All right, how are you going to become a good basketball player? There's no basketball court. All right, that's not going to work. All right, so we got to figure something out here. I would tell them some things they could do like at home, et cetera, et cetera. But the general answer for them was, well, you're right, because your environment is not set up to support the thing that you're looking to achieve. It's the same thing for you all. If any of you works at home, for example, I might do a whole live on this. I did an episode of my show probably a year ago, maybe less than a year ago, about how to work from home professionally. And when you work from home, your environment needs to be set up so you can actually work. All right, how many of you ever tried working from home and you spent most of the day distracted by stuff that had nothing to do with work? Whether it was your dog, it was your kids, it was your roommate, it was whoever else lives in the house, it was your TV, it was your bed, it was your couch, it was all the normal stuff that you pay attention to when you're quote unquote at home, but you're supposed to be working and you didn't do it. So this is one of the reasons that companies don't like people working from companies don't like having people work from home because y'all be doing their work. They want you in the office so they can watch you. All right, so they can see exactly what it is that you're doing. But anyway, let me not digress from this. So let me recap my points, and then we'll take questions. You got a question in the comment, go ahead and put it in the comment section right now. We're talking here today about how to build a high performance culture. And this does not necessarily mean you have to have a staff or people working for you. Culture can just be you with yourself, looking in the mirror. That's culture as well. And culture is just what are the norms of behavior for you or whoever. So number one, standards. That's the starting and end point for any high level performance, is that there are simple rules, baselines, and non-negotiables. The standard is non-negotiable. So you set something as a standard, there are no exceptions to a standard. Everybody understand this? So I have a standard. For example, I work out 6 days a week at least. And usually on Sundays, I'll do some light stuff. So technically that's a workout too. But my standard is I'm always going to be in great shape. The standard is not how many times I work out. Standard is my results, my physical results, how I feel, how I look. Physically, that's the standard for me, and there are no exceptions to that. Right? So you're never going to see me out of shape. You're never going to see me not having some muscle tone and muscle definition, because one of my standards is I'm always in that type of shape. And how does that connect to the next point? Number two, raise the floor. And again, raising the floor means instead of setting higher goals for yourself, just raise the floor. So as I told you, there's a restaurant out there, restaurants, plural, who tell the wait staff that if you're not making at least $10,000 a month in tips, you're fired. Because clearly you're not good enough to make $10,000 a month. You shouldn't be working here. We want everybody making at least 10 grand a month. That's like floor. The floor is 10 grand a month, not the goal, the floor. That means if you don't at least make this much, you cannot work here. That's a standard. And any of you can do that with yourself. And again, if it's harder for you to set goals, or maybe you feel like your goals are a little bit too vague and arbitrary, try setting floors. Those are much more easy to measure and much more easy to hold yourself accountable to if goals are an issue for you. Number three, systems of accountability. So if you're going to tell your staff they got to make $10,000 a month in tips, you got to tell them how to dress. You got to tell them how to talk. You got to tell them how to serve people. You got to tell them how to upsell items on the menu. You got to tell them how to pour the wine in the glass. You got to tell them how to put the food on the table. You got to tell them what to do so that they can actually do the stuff that leads to the outcome. Again, like this guy I know runs an insurance agency. He says, I spend 6 figures a month on ads to get leads so that my sales staff has people to call so that they can hit the numbers that I have set for them as targets. So he sets the standard, he sets the floor. Here's how many sales you got to make. And in order to have an environment that is conducive to the goal, he has to do something too. All right. So understand, when you're creating a high performance culture, it's not just about telling people what to do. It's also about making sure you set it up so that they can actually do it. Now, you can't tell people to do stuff and there's no environment for them to do it. Again, if you want to play basketball, you can't have the closest basketball court be 3 miles away and it's 10 degrees outside in the wintertime. How are you going to get good at basketball? The environment is not in alignment with the goal. Everybody understand that? So your environment and your goals must be aligned. You can't just set the goal and say, I'm just going to white knuckle it. I'm just going to fight my way through to reach the goal when you have nothing that's setting you up to be successful. You want to be a good salesperson, you need prospects. Yo, man, Reed, what's going on, my man? Thank you. So now with all that said, let me take questions and comments. If you got anything, put it in the comment section. Good thing is with the topic we're talking about today, I think I can see all the comments. So at least on TikTok. Let me start over on YouTube. Inspires said, I appreciate your content from back in high school a few years ago. Appreciate you, Inspires. I don't know if you're still here, but appreciate that. Ryan Raya says, you was one of the first podcasts I've listened to 10 years ago. Glad to see you still giving out game on and off the court. You motivated me to be great. Oh, that's excellent. So we need testimonials for this. I need y'all to do these on video and send them to me. We'll put these on our website. But thank you, Ryan Raya. It's good to hear from you, sir. And my show is still going. Work on Your Game Masterclass. Y'all call that podcast. Still going. You can find that on Apple, Spotify, etc. That's for everybody, by the way. I got a show that comes out every day, Apple, Spotify. If you like what I talk about here, you will love what you hear over there. All right. And, workonyourgameuniversity.com. I sometimes forget to mention that. That's where we do all our coaching programs, et cetera, et cetera. So if you want to work with me directly, that's where it happens, in Work on Your Game University. So for whatever reason now, the last couple of days on TikTok, I was telling you how I was trying to scroll through the comments and it wouldn't let me. Now it's letting me scroll through perfectly. So I think it must be just if you get so many comments that it just breaks. But if you don't have too many comments, then it works normally. So I guess it's just when I was talking about current events, I got so many comments that I couldn't scroll through, but now it's working the way it's supposed to be working. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I know I'm not going to talk about current events all the time, but I will talk about it because the current events draws attention. Martin said, I wish you were running for the presidency. I don't wish that. That politics is a super dirty game. Several reasons I would never get into politics. Number one, I'm not built for the public sector. That's number one. Number two, you have to lie to be a successful politician. You have to lie to win an election. You cannot tell people the full truth and win an election because you will piss too many people off with the truth. And number three is a super dirty game. As soon as you get in it, your opponents are going to dig into everything in your history and use it all against you and tell the whole world about it. And it ain't like I got some terrible, dirty past, but I probably got some things in my past I don't want the whole world knowing about. So I would never get into politics just for that alone. I don't want people coming out talking about I did this and that 30 years ago, like they're doing with Trump, even though I didn't do anything. Martin said, Denver, Colorado. Shout out to Denver, Colorado. Denver's a beautiful place. Too cold in the winter for me, but beautiful place still. Even in the winter, it's beautiful, but couldn't be me. I got to be where it's warm. Let's see. Someone said you're pretending like you have a lav mic. This mic is connected to my phone where I'm doing Instagram. TikTok, there's no mic connected to this. So y'all are just hearing the straight up feed straight out of the speaker. So any of you see this mic and you're like, why doesn't it sound like he's talking in a mic? Because this is going over there, not over there. Just in case anybody was wondering. All right, so what else we got? I'm 42 years of age. I was born in 1982. So it's now late October. We got November, December. I was born in February. So about 4 months away, I'll be 43. Sometimes I forget how old I am. But that is correct. What I just told you was accurate. Someone said, you again, different topic with all those books that you don't read. Now, I've never seen a person have books on a bookshelf in their own space that they don't read books. I've never seen it. So all of these books, I've read all of them because I wrote them. So every word in any of these books is written by me. So, I mean, I know you're trolling, but I get it. Brown Power Ranger says cute. Now I love that he's smart, but he's got that you're fired, bro, with the pad on the back. What does that mean? He's got that you're fired, bro, with the pad on the back. What does that mean? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're referring to. But you did say I'm smart and I'm cute. I'm assuming Brown Power Ranger, you're a female, right? I don't want any men telling me that I'm cute. But as long as you're a female, I appreciate it. Spiritual Suitcase he said something about the lab mic. I already addressed that. Phyllis Landris, what's going on? Good morning. Marion, good morning to you. Thank you for the badge, the gift. I don't know what they call these things. The hearts. I appreciate it. Number one gifter badge. White Ye said Lex Luthor. I don't even know what Lex Luthor looks like. Is that a compliment or is that a joke? I don't know if that's a compliment or a joke. But either way, I appreciate the engagement. Rhonda KT, good morning. Yellow Man Reed got the number one gifter badge. Thank you, sir. Coming through as usual. Someone said, what's your advice on dealing with bad leadership? Meaning you are on the receiving end of bad leadership. Well, you probably want to go find some good leadership. You might want to get out of there. But if you can't leave yet, bide your time. One thing about the athletic world is sometimes you get bad leaders. Sometimes you get a coach who's just not that great of a coach. Good thing is you can learn from anybody. Even if someone's doing the wrong thing, you can learn from them. And then you can use that as a what not to do in the future. So there's a lot of coaches I had in sports who weren't that good, but because of that experience, I could take what I learned from them to make sure that other people don't get that experience if I'm leading. And I can just tell people, hey, here are the things you shouldn't do if you're a leader, because this is what one of my leaders did and they sucked and they did this thing and this is why it was wrong and this is why you shouldn't do it. Here's what you should do instead. So you can learn from people who mess up. Chocolate Diva, good morning to you. Okay, so I think I answered all the questions. This is a new thing. So when I'm not talking about current events, I can answer all the comments. But when I do, there's so many of them. But I still like talking about current events. So I'll probably, as I already told you all, first of all, y'all know I do these lives every morning, Monday through Friday, usually starting around 8 o'clock. Today we started a little bit later, but usually in the 8 o'clock hour, usually at 8 o'clock on the dot, we start these lives. I don't always talk about current events. Often I talk about subjects like this one, which is, personal and professional development, which is, for those who are not familiar with that phrase, that simply means material that is designed to help you do better, be better, perform better, and achieve more results. That's what I'm about. All right, that's where I'm at. That's not for everybody. Not everybody has the ambition to grow and get better and succeed. But those of you who have been listening to all this, I'm assuming you're one of those people, and you're my people. You're the people who I'm really looking to connect with. Again, I do talk about current events every now and then because, first of all, it's news. And secondly, this is social media. And one of the things you want on social media is attention. So I know if I was to talk about Kamala and Donald Trump today, it'd be like 10 times more people in here. But I don't want to talk about that every day because it kind of gets annoying to me to even talk about this stuff. But I will keep talking about it, especially between now and the election. So just so y'all know, between now and the election, I will talk about it more. So tomorrow's Friday when I'm recording this, those of y'all watching on replay. I don't know what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, but next week, I'll probably talk about current events probably all week because the election is the following Tuesday. So that means we got Monday through Friday next week, and then we got Monday and Tuesday. So next week, I'll probably talk about current events damn near every day. Why? Because I am in the attention business on some levels. I don't want everybody's attention, but I do want attention in general. And doing that got some of you to follow me. So some of you found me over the last week or two simply because I was talking about a current event, but you're still here, even though I'm not talking about it right now. So that's kind of the game. Sometimes you got to play the game on social media and talk about whatever's drawing the attention, because then when you get the attention, some of the people who in there is kind of like a spaghetti strainer. Not everybody's going to stick around when you stop talking about the hot thing, but some people will stick around. So some of you found me because I was talking about Kamala and Trump, but you're still here. So that's kind of the game that you got to play sometimes with social media. So just to warn you all, between now and the election, I will be talking about current events more often. Why? Because why not? It works. And in social media, one of the things that works is getting attention. That's what you got to do. So I will be doing that. I'll figure out what exactly I'm going to talk about. But as you already have seen, I try to be balanced. I give you my opinions, but I try to balance out an opinion on one side with an opinion on the other side to make sure everybody understands that I am a critical thinker, which means I can look at both sides of a situation, even if I have a personal opinion on one side, I can understand why someone may have the opinion of the other side. And I'm not emotionally engaged in anything that has to do with politics, which means I can logically have these discussions without getting upset or angry at anybody or anything, because generally I really don't give a damn who wins. I'm more focused on my personal growth and my personal success, which shall continue and advance regardless of who wins. And that's the same way y'all should be. I did a whole hour on that yesterday. If you didn't hear it, go make sure you go check that. It's probably still on your replays wherever you are consuming me right here. Now, all that said, folks, workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's where our focus is. That's where our energy is moving forward. So any of you want to know what exactly do I do when I'm not doing these, it's Work on Your Game University. That is coaching, speaking, consulting, working with people like you, working with businesses and helping people advance themselves on subjects like what I talked about here, not Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. All right, everybody got that? And that link is in my bio, by the way. So if you want to step into the university, just go to the link in my bio. You can find out more about that. You can see testimonials, feedback from others who we are and have worked with. And that's that. So everybody have a great, what's going on, Chocolate Diva? Nikki, thank you. All right, everybody have a great rest of your day. I will see you all tomorrow. Topic TBD. We don't know yet. I'll see you tomorrow. Work on your game.